Hello, thanks for coming on board again with me for this session of Cults in the Occulture. It's March 27th, I believe. Yep. And I'm going to cover a character, some people call it a cult leader, that you probably never heard of, like many in my files. But it's based on this concept, this t-shirt I have on, the man, the myth, the legend, which I got for $5 a year or so ago at a hardware store. Couldn't resist it, it's cheap. But it also reminded me of kind of an inside joke at the hospital where I worked, when I was training this young man that had come in to learn the job as a crisis counselor. And I was the old guy around there. I was in my mid-70s, and no one was close to my age. It seemed like I've been there forever to him. So he would call me the man, the myth, and the legend. So having said that, there are some people that believe this about themselves. We can call them narcissists or predatory narcissists that form cults. They are legends in their own minds, and they wish to be recognized as such. So we're going to look at this character, this man who was born in 1943, and he died of a heart attack in 2007. His name is Peter N. Zarlenga, and he was known as the Orator with a capital O. And in fact, he wrote his one most famous book. He wrote a few, but this book here, it's called The Orator, and it has a number of very brief chapters in it about his ideas, which appear to be derivative of Ayn Rand's objectivism, where truth is truth and we have to save America, and the youth are being misled by corrupted left wing and Kantian philosophy and whatever. So Zarlenga grew up, I think, around the Chicago area. He was in the military when he was young, and then he developed this philosophy, which I don't know how he did that, but I came across a couple of current websites that are citing his book, The Orator, and using his quotes as motivation for the followers on those particular podcasts and websites. And one of them is called Starship Aurora, which is kind of an objectivist Ayn Rand spinoff. And Starship quotes Zarlenga by saying the purpose of life is to be what you are and to become what you could be, almost right out of the armed services. Join us and be all you can be. There's a lot of platitudes like this in Zarlenga's teaching. So what this person in Starship Aurora says is that in the late 70s, when marketing the seminars of a charismatic orator named Peter Zarlenga, we were able to sell weekly 3-hour seminars at $50. It's $1977. And for over a year to a group of 30 people. And this was in Edmonton, Canada, using recordings of Zarlenga's previous seminars in Chicago. What sold them? Among many reasons, we were able to offer them these clear, simple, bold statements from Zarlenga. And another one that I came across is on deviantart.com. And there's, with regards to Peter Zarlenga quotes, they look at the Orator, the last edition in 1981. By the way, this is the 1981 edition, and mine is signed by the author to the ex-member that gave it to me after I had exit counseled her from the group in around 1987. I'll get into that a little later. So there's these 4 principles of achievement that this particular group, DeviantArt, cites, that Zarlenga came up with. And you have to try very hard, very long, but if you set your goals, you'll get there. The number one theme is identify your aim, choose what you want to do, base your decision on the truth. Truth is vague here, but it essentially means it's an absolute truth. There's an either or concept behind it, and it's similar to Ayn Rand, who didn't believe in any kind of fuzzy gray areas, even though her personal cult was a rather fuzzy gray area group. But let's leave that aside. The second point is simplify, divide your movement into easy to do directions. If you fail, divide again. And then concentrate, do one thing at a time extremely well, then move on to the next. These aren't bad ideas. You can break down your goals into increments, and as you reach each one, you build up to the next one. And then you move, the fourth thing in this theme, sustain your movement at a comfortable pace and begin and don't stop. And again, it's kind of common sense, but I don't know what he means by comfortable, because he was quite urgent to his followers. And he has in his book here these illustrations like, for simplify. And this is like, takes up 2 pages. There's a lot of short stuff in the book. But you see this little figure over here standing below a ladder, and then the star, is the self, the eagle. You become an eagle soaring through the human cultures. So he also goes into theology or whatever, and into religion. And he has a real thing against religion in the sense of established religions. So here on page 73, he has an interview with God. God is moving to another universe because too many Christians moved into his neighborhood. Asked about his actions, God said, return good for good, return evil with justice. Asked about mercy, God said, what's that? Asked if he was angry, God said, wouldn't you be if something you made didn't work? I mean, it's almost like the Gnostic God who created a universe that's flawed and never going to be divine. It's always fallen and under the control of a false God. On the first page here, like a prologue, again, very short, he says about himself, a poet has arisen from among the people. He is called the Orator. Gods and kings tremble when this man speaks. Listen to him and remember yourself. Remember, you were born free. Some people might say he's talking tongue-in-cheek, but, he doesn't say he was. And he has a lot of other things which spread doubt on his ethics. For instance, he says, what kind of a man, what kind of a woman are you, so afraid of life, so dead to reality, so much an asshole that you do not free your children from what imprisoned your spirit? In other words, the churches, the schools, the culture that has them locked up in this false narrative, kind of like the Matrix. Some of these cultures, the idea of the Matrix. The previous video I did on the Cassiopeans believes in this Matrix idea. And he says, no, you do not love. You seek to destroy what other people love. You religiously insane liars and fools who hold faith above reason, belief above knowledge, feeling above being, illusion above reality, ignorance above vision, evasion above action, desire above truth. You Christians and Jews, liars and fools, destroying America, humanity's dream of freedom. Freedom is self-control. You cannot control yourselves. Your God is the sick emotion of slobs who have lost all self-control. Your salvation is without dignity, without honor, without virtue. Your beliefs are the opposite of the principles of America. So he, like Ayn Rand, pretends that he knows what these principles are and he's going to teach them to you. And he has these workshops, like it said here back in the late 70s, of around 30 people. And when I encountered him through this ex-member, her mother introduced me to her when she was deep into this thing. There was only about a dozen to maybe 30 people that ever showed up. And at that time, he was now living with his mother and teaching from the mother's living room. The mother put up with this. And this young woman would go to these weekly meetings. Her mother got concerned because she was really becoming constricted and secretive about what was going on. She was a music student, played violin, also in college, but all of that was drifting away to follow his teachings, this Mr. Zarlenga's teachings. So what happened before that? I mean, he started this thing in the late 70s, So an article in the New York Times archives comes up, and it was published on February 3rd, 1979, about him. He caused quite a stir at the high schools in this affluent neighborhood in Chicago by passing out preliminary copies of this book to students for free, and then wanting to start workshops in order to start his revolution, to objectify people to take over America with the truth, his truth, obviously. So in this article, the school got wind of this, about 2,800 students in this one school, and they said there was rumors began to spread that this guy, Peter Nivio Zarlenga, thought himself a messiah, and that the book, The Orator, espoused the cause of a new religious cult. So the distribution of his book was halted, because the students some of them were getting upset, some of them were getting caught up in it, some of them thought he was a nutcase. And so Zarlenga called the local TV station and challenged the school to let him come speak. So this is how arrogant he was. Well, he showed up at the school at the lunch hour on January 10th, 1979, and was greeted by hundreds of jeering students, some with placards that likened him to the Reverend Jim Jones, the late head of the People's Temple. So this was in that post-Jim Jones People's Temple debacle. Cult was on the mind of a lot of people. Zarlenga was pelted with food and snowballs. Some students tried to overturn his camper. Others slashed his tires and knocked out the headlights. Someone who had read the book told me that they thought it was similar to the literature and tactics of a cult. He said, I got a copy, read it, and decided that it was inappropriate for the students. That's the principle. So the article goes on about the Orator and why it was so controversial. For instance, he writes, sex is good and the church says it's bad. Man is not out of order with God. It is God who is out of order with man. It is Christianity that is perverted, he writes. So at the end of the book that they got, it says, get up and go get your checkbook and order as many copies of this book as you can afford, and then mail your letter out tonight. And anyway, so he was recruiting, he was trying to make money, and he had to go underground after that for some time, but he, like I said, moved back in with his mom, if he wasn't living with her at the time, but and kept this group going. And this young woman who was about 20 years old got caught up in this, and the mother flew me to the Midwest to talk to her. At first she was reticent, but after we got settled, half hour of discussion, she agreed to talk to me. And after about 2 days, she realized this thing was truly a kind of a cult, and his ideas were really weird and overvalued, and she bailed out of the whole thing and was quite thankful to me even a year later when I saw her again at a national conference. So Zarlenga remains in, the way these movements do, in the consciousness of some people that like that kind of objectivist philosophy, that like to be totally right or absolutely right, and that want to be superior. And he definitely gives that vibe in his book, The Orator. And, as I read in the beginning, he's like this Nietzschean Ubermensch that has arisen, like he says, right in the beginning, a poet has risen from among the people. He is called the Orator. Gods and kings tremble when this man speaks. So anyway, I'm going to let it go at that. I'll leave some links. It's interesting to look back at these cults. Like I said, it's mostly like ripples and waves of his ideas are still out there in some fringe websites among younger people that want to feel really special, like his ideas encourage them to feel. But again, he's been gone since 2007. I hope he rests in peace, and I hope his ideas also die and rest in peace, because they are way over the top. And I think that school principal had it right. Students shouldn't be reading this stuff. They're too vulnerable to undue influence and can't always analyze this kind of narcissistic pressure on their lives easily, and some can get caught up in it. So thank you for listening. And so you learned something about Peter Zarlenga and another man, myth, and legend of his own making. Thank you. Have a good day.